Newstalk, Sauga960 Raw, Mike Richards. Oh, the Leaf talk. Oh, the Leaf talk. There's lots of it. There's lots of love. There's lots of confetti throwing. I'm sure in some households, maybe it's gnocchi. Like the next guest we have, people are like, what is this, TLN? What's happening to the show? Every segment now is like full tele-Latino, Italian, and I'm like, well, it is what it is. It's always been that way. Even in Calgary, it was that way. In Calgary, it was the same thing. And back in the fan days when I started doing Anthony from Woodbridge. I mean, it was the same thing. You gotta hand it to it. There's something about the Leafs. It's magical, and the magic continues after a first round, boys. So from the Puckin' Leafs podcast, we got Coach Frank, we got Bobby Bottles, Fratello, the legend.
Buongiorno.
Bobby Bottles, come va? I was saying this morning, I said, you might have been the first communication from anybody in Toronto I ever got. I'm pretty sure the first tweet I ever read, I'm like, look at this guy. His handle, he's mint. Bobby Bottles.
And wasn't it about tennis? Something about tennis, I think it was.
Because it was, I'm like, look at this. This is unbelievable. This is great. Well, guys, great to have you on the show this morning. And certainly lots to talk about. The only thing, and we had Rob Furnish on, right? So we talked about it, and I'm like, yeah, like let some steam off winning a first round. Like let the people have some fun. I really don't care. And people are like, look, it looks like a parade. Leaf hate, right? I get it. I get the Leaf hate. They think they've won already. But when you've waited this long for something, let the people have their day. And that's how I feel about it. But the reality is, and this is the way I've been putting it all morning long, the bully that always took your lunch at school, that would be the Bruins. Every day you show up, they take that lunch. One day you find out that family left your street. The bully moved out. You're like, this is awesome. Yeah, not that awesome, because the guy that used to take your lunch, they just got their lunch taken by someone else who just moved on your street.
That's right.
Before we start throwing confetti and saying this is the easiest, people, oh, what a path to the Stanley Cup. I'm like, do you see how Florida spun their tires for 5 months and then got it together? So, Coach Frank, I'll start with you.
Yep.
Looking at this series, this may not be, and I don't know why people think it's going to be a walk in the park, because I think you're in for another 7-game fight at the very least. I think it's wide open too. This thing's going to be kind of a wild series, I think.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Mike, they got a guy over there named Matt Tkachuk, who I'd love to have on my team right now. And, you're feeding off that energy, right? And, the thing about Florida is they're catching, quote unquote, lightning in a bottle at the right time. And you usually see the teams that are successful in the playoffs are not the best teams, but it's the teams that get their game right at the right time. And if you think the Leafs are playing with house money, you're now playing a team who's playing with even more. And you heard Tkachuk at the end of the game against Game 7 said, listen, nobody expected us to be here but us. You can't convince the guys in the room that they didn't expect to be here. And, listen, it may not be in Game 1 because it's a quick turnaround for them, but I do expect a really back and forth series with a lot more scrums than you probably got with Tampa, because that's how they beat the Bruins. And I fully expect that for them to take it to the Leafs.
Bobby, if I'm taking a look at what has transpired in that first series, what are the things that you looked at as being sort of difference makers that maybe didn't happen before, but maybe it wasn't in previous playoffs, maybe it wasn't even regular season? What stood out to you as the change that sees the Leafs move on from series number 1?
I think we talked about it on our show. The mental toughness was totally different this year. They didn't fold down 4-1. It would have been easy to just shut it down and come home, and they kept battling. Timely goaltending. I think that's the one thing they haven't really gotten in a lot of these runs. It seems like the other teams have always had that timely goaltending. They finally got it this year. When they needed a save, they got a save. I mean, in overtime of Game 6, Samsonov makes the save. They come back down and they score it. They just seem like a different team this year.
Yeah, and I think it's also fair to say that, when we sit there in the fetal position over all the goaltending over all the years, whether it was James Reimer, I mean, you just go down the list. Freddie got, either people loved them or you just felt like you couldn't count on him to make those saves. And I think, because both of you, and certainly Coach Frank, has it from a coaching perspective, the confidence that guys, the change in their confidence when the guy between the pipes, they don't have to worry about, when they realize that they could make a mistake, but that guy's going to save their ass. When you have that, that changes that D-core in front of you. That changes the way that guys forecheck, because they no longer are looking over the shoulder thinking that they're maybe a little frail in goal. I think it changes going from the back out. And that's why sometimes I think I see some of these performances. I think I look at Samsonov and maybe being the key to some of this.
Absolutely. Like, you know, if you watch the Leafs, you know what they love to do is they love to activate their defense. They love to move the defense down the wall. Hell, you've seen Riley in front of the net a lot of times too, you know, as that extra forward. They wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't think Samsonov, you know, could make that save if they had a 2-on-1 going back or an odd man rush. Samsonov gives them that renewed confidence to play the style, that run and gun style that made them successful, and not maybe hold back because, oh geez, is this guy going to stop another one? You know what I mean? Like that mentality helps you play your game and allows them to take more chances. And I think you hit the nail bang on. When you look over your shoulder and you look at the guy who think you can stop a puck, you're playing with a lot more confidence and a lot more, you can push the pace a little more. So I think now you're going up against another guy who's now doing that for Florida. Hey, this guy's also won 2 Vezinas. So if you don't think Florida's doing the same thing, you know, it's going to be an X factor in the series, in my opinion.
Bobby, who would scare you the most looking at that roster, what you just saw? Because they played physical. They played physical against the Boston team, and the physical side is the one thing I always say at this time of year, even though it's a little old school, but the guys are going to start growing the beards. They're going to start, you know, they're going to start looking like Vikings. And you know what? It's just a part of the, I don't think that part of the game has changed. So looking at Florida, what are the things that would be your concerns from a Leaf perspective?
I think that's it. And their 2 best players are 2 of the biggest, most physical guys in the league. I mean, there's no shock. It's Tkachuk and it's Barkov. Those are the 2 guys that are going to scare you. And when the Leafs got rid of Sandin, they got a lot of hate. I don't know if Sandin would have been able to play against the 3rd and 4th line against Tampa. I don't know how he would have fared. I thought those were great moves. The Luke Schenn move has been one of the more underrated things. He will be a big key, but those are the 2 guys. I mean, I know they have some pretty nice depth. They've got, you know, Bennett playing well, and they've got some guys playing well, but it's those 2. Those 2 are the keys, and they're big and physical, and the Leafs D are going to have to be, they're going to have to match that.
You know, I think it's interesting, you know, some of the names we've talked about, including Tkachuk and Sam Bennett, both guys who were wearing Flames jerseys. I think looking back on it, maybe they would have wished that they still had kept wearing Flames jerseys because the guys they got didn't play. It cost Daryl his job yesterday. But it is this time of year again where it is the small details that will catch you. It's a bad line change. It's you know, some of those things that are, you know, even for goalies, it's things like angles, rebound accountability, like all those kinds of things all kind of matter. And I kind of look at then those intangibles like leadership. Where do you think the Leafs, who do they get the leadership from? Because sometimes it's a rah thing, and other times it's just by example. And it does vary from team to team. Where does leadership come from for you, Coach Frank, on the Leafs?
Well, I think, yeah, you know, look no further than, you know, it's very easy to say, well, look at the guys who wear the letters on the jersey. You know, that's an easy thing to say. But I look at a guy like Nola Chari. I look at a guy, you know, like Luke Schenn, and I'll tell you why. We talked about the other night that the most surprising stat to us right now in the playoffs is the Maple Leafs lead the playoffs in hits and block shots. Yeah. And who would have thought we'd be saying about that about a Leafs team the last couple of years? And, you know, it's contagious. You look at a guy like Achari, look at a guy like Schenn, O'Reilly blocking shots, going down to one knee. And who's blocking shots too? Austin Matthews is blocking shots now. Mitch Marner is blocking shots. Stuff like that is leadership. It's not always a pat in the back and a kick in the ass. It's by example. And for them doing the little things, like you said, on the ice, it becomes contagious and you get what we call a buy-in. Everybody buys in to a common goal, and that's what you're getting. So I look at like those 2 examples out of kind of off the board that have been absolutely crucial for their success.
You know, it's funny when you talk about buy-in, that means that the players have also bought into their head coach. And so when I look at this coaching matchup, it's also a very interesting one, and everyone's very familiar with the guy behind the other bench. He's kind of he's been everywhere, but he's been here. What do you think the coaching looks like at this level? Now that you're by the panic of trying to get by round 1, where do you think Keefe's at now? Did he do a good job with his guys in round 1? Where are you looking at Keefe in this situation for you?
I think he kind of saved his behind with that, with the game 7 move of going 11-7. I thought for the first time, I'm not saying he outcoached John Cooper. I think for the duration of the series, I still thought he was outcoached a bit because he wasn't making those adjustments in the neutral zone. But I think for him going to the 11-7, which hurt the home matchup for Tampa, was the first more obvious sign that, Keefe is willing to make the big move. Keefe was willing to take Hall out. And now you have another beast where, listen, they've had success against Florida in the regular season. I know it's a different beast, but he's going to have to make those adjustments when Tkachuk is on the ice and when he's not. They're going to split Tkachuk and Barkov. If I'm looking at the lines, they're playing on two separate lines. So now he's got to figure out, because it looks like he's going back to 12-6, who's going to match up best. Because I guarantee you right now, Barkov is going to be right beside Matthews. So it's going to be interesting how he now moves his lines as the series progresses.
What about for you, Bobby? What's your take on that?
Whenever you win a series, I'm not going to criticize the coaching. I will say that they had a giant hump to get over. They had hey, you've got to get over the 20-year hump. And next round, if they are able to progress, they're going to have hey, you have to get over the 50-year hump. This is going to be the one round where we know in this city, it's impossible to block out the media. There shouldn't be any pressure. Obviously, they're not content with where they are. But I want to see how they play. I would love to see if they play a little bit more free, a little bit more easy. They won't have the weight of the world on their shoulders after getting over that first hump. This will be the one round. Florida is going to be very formidable. I mean, people aren't going to talk about them winning the President's Trophy last year. They're a real hockey team. And this is the one round where the media is not going to have that one narrative of, hey, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. This is just going to be go out there, play a good hard 7 games. And I think, me being a fan of another team that had to get over a hurdle, I noticed them play a lot more freer and easier as the playoffs went on.
Well, let's talk about that team, Bobby. Who's the secret team? Who's the secret team that you're
not going to like it, Michael, but I'm a big Canucks fan. So,
oh no,
I know.
Sorry, Mike. Sorry, man. What can I do?
That's like going to an Italian restaurant. They say, by the way, it's vegetarian only. What are you talking about?
It's tough. I couldn't help it. But we saw they couldn't get over Chicago. Once they got over Chicago, they just played free and easy, and I want to see that from the Leafs. I think that's the one key, is that just the weight of the world has kind of been taken off their shoulders for one round.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question for both of you, and then and we'll wrap it up. But I'm really curious, and Bobby, I will start with you. You saw some stuff from Austin Matthews, which to me, some of it I just hadn't seen before, like the ability to go in there, go into the dirty places, go into the nasty spots, like hang in there, show the heart of a guy who wants to carry the team on his shoulders and win. Like I did see that. I thought that, Morgan Riley also, getting his face kicked in, he's cut, he's bleeding. All of a sudden he starts to look like the guys that we loved in the city. He does. Of the guys left on that roster that you still think there's, they haven't hit that ceiling. Maybe they got some room. Maybe they can step it up in this round. Who would that be on your list with the Leafs that need to also come up to that level that maybe haven't in that first round?
I don't think you can ask much more of Ryan O'Reilly. I mean, I think he's been fantastic. He's been the Swiss Army knife. I'll go with Mitch Marner. I think it's the easy one because of the other guys, but I thought he was fine last series. Mitch Marner is, to me, the most dangerous penalty killer I've ever seen, especially from an offensive guy. I felt like he feels more dangerous on the penalty kill. I didn't get that sense last series. Morgan Riley was fantastic. Austin Matthews was fantastic. Mitch Marner was fine. I think he's the one guy that maybe can get just a little bit more, but he wasn't bad last series. I'm not saying he was bad, but I think that's the one.
Frank?
Imagine being just fine and leading the playoffs in points.
Yeah.
I'm going to take William Nylander. I think Marner was the obvious, but for me, it's Nylander. And we talked about it on our show. I think the X factor, again, for me is also there's no Victor Hedman back there. There is not a guy that's going to play 30 minutes, 32 minutes. Like Ekblad can't do it anymore. Montour's not that guy. Nylander should be looking at this lineup and be like, you know what? I got carte blanche on this ice. They need secondary scoring. If they're going to try to shut down Matthews, he's got to get the puck to Nylander. He's got to shoot. He's had success against Florida. He's my target.
Guys, great job here this morning. It was awesome having you on the show. We'll definitely try to do this again when we've got time. And by time, I mean, if the Leafs stay in it, then we'll get a chance to do more of this stuff. But that was Fratelli. That was amazing. So take care. Ci vediamo, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, guys. Go Leafs.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Coach Frank and Bobby Bottles from the Puck and Leafs podcast doing a great job there this morning. It's kind of cool in that the way that we, and Brendan, you could probably speak this a little bit, in getting some of these guys who have their own podcasts and getting some of those that speak the language of the fan and yet are very You know, like Frank to me could be on any station doing whatever he wants. But it's the style that to me feels very comfortable, as opposed to having like your NHL insider, a guy from TSN, a guy from Sportsnet. I think it's very interesting. It sounds really good when these guys come on and talk about it like a real fan, but an educated fan. I mean, I think that's why people like podcasts. It feels different.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. And coming on here, and it's kind of the same style. It fits the style of the show. I think that's the best way to put it, is that you can just kind of come on and like you said, it's not an insider. It's not somebody that necessarily works around the team. It's just
Are paid by those that own the team.
They're just fans like we are. And I mean, but they're informed. And then they have, I mean, obviously they're really good at doing that, and they have good opinions talking about the Leafs and all that stuff. So I just think it fits the show really well, and that's why it works so well.